Well, a warm welcome along to the last of our Euro 2024 preview shows, brought to you in conjunction with freesupertips.com, your home for daily football hackers and bet builders. Once again, it's Warren Ashurst and Mark Langdon with you to discuss the final of Euro 2024. And after all the drama of the last 50 matches and 1 month, we've finally got to the final where Spain will face England after a dramatic win, of course, for Gareth Southgate's men over the Netherlands to send the nation into raptures and make a hero of Ollie Watkins along the way as well with his last-minute winner against the Dutch. Before we have a look at the final in more detail, let's review the tournament overall. As I say, 50 matches we've seen, Mark. It's kind of flown by over the space of a month, but there's been some highs and lows along the way, and we're going to have a look at the best of what we've seen so far, starting with the best game, I think, overall, and what would stand out in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to think of all 50, isn't it? Because I mean, it was a tournament that kind of started in fantastic fashion, and then there was a lull, I think it's fair to say, and the last 16 probably wasn't enough sort of exciting matches there. And I even remember there was a quarter-final, wasn't there, sort of a double-header quarter-final, the kind of Portugal-France game particularly, that just went on. It felt like it went on for like about 5 days. But I think international tournaments, I think we do get a bit misty-eyed over them, Warren. I think that, they're always about moments. Like, people hark back to Italia 90 and how great it was. I mean, it wasn't really. It was a really low-scoring tournament, but there were moments in that, and there will always be moments in sort of all tournaments, and you go to like that Bellingham goal against Slovakia, the Watkins goal against Netherlands as well, in that sort of dramatic semi-final for England's victory. But I think the best game was Turkey 3, Georgia 1. I mean, that just seemed to have everything. Great stadium in Dortmund. There was a brilliant atmosphere, a gung-ho game. There was great goals on both sides. And it kind of unleashed the underdog, didn't it, in Georgia? Because I think a lot of the times we expect underdogs to sit back and be quite physical and boring. But Georgia, as they showed throughout the tournament, were like a bundle of joy. And I think you could say the same about Turkey as well, really. They were absolutely chaotic in their game. So I'm going to go for Turkey v Georgia as the best game.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. Absolute beauty of a game. I always like it when it's pouring down with rain as well. It seems to just add to the fixture itself. What about best goal? We've had quite a few to select from. You mentioned Jude Bellingham's overhead kick, Ollie Watkins' finish against the Netherlands as well. There's been some absolute belters on the way.
Yeah, there have been a lot of goals from distance, haven't there, in this tournament? Not direct free kicks, but sort of real thunderbolts. And I'm going to go for a goal in the semi-final. I think there were some amazing goals in those semi-finals, even down to Simons' goal, which I at first I wondered if Pickford could have done better with, but I think ultimately it's just a great strike. But I'm going to go for somebody even younger than Simons, and that's Lamine Yamal, and that goal against France, because I do think context matters when you're looking for best goal. And for a 16-year-old, and he's 17, isn't he, on Saturday, but for a 16-year-old to be able to do that in a European Championship semi-final is absolutely remarkable. Picked the ball up 25 yards out, drifted in, as he has done throughout the tournament, onto that left foot. Unlike the rest of the tournament, where maybe the finishing wasn't quite so perfect. I mean, he's found about the only spot that Magnon couldn't get to. It was an amazing achievement for him. And at that time, I wondered whether the game was beginning to get away from Spain, because they were 1-0 down. France were counter-attacking. And Mbappe, if you remember, had an opportunity, not a great one, but he had a shot, and it got blocked and potentially could have gone 2-0. And he changed the course of that game. And I think that's what great players do. And it feels almost obvious to say it, but Yamal just feels like he's got to be a superstar. I mean, you can't be that good at 16 and sort of not be, I think.
Especially when we look back to what we were doing at 16, Mark, I think it's probably fair to say that it's another world. I'll mention a special goal as well from Arda Güler for Turkey, which was not too dissimilar to the strike actually from Lamine Yamal. But I couldn't disagree with that strike for Spain in the semi-final. If we're talking about best players, I assume the player in question we've just been discussing will be up there.
Yeah, I mean, he's favourite, isn't he, to be the player of the tournament? I mean, there haven't been like incredible players up there. I think it's fair to say you can sort of go through the teams. I thought Musiala was very good, for Germany, and if we're looking at sort of Portugal, I thought Vitinha had a really good tournament, and so did João Cancelo, and they went out at the quarterfinal stage. For Switzerland, and Doy was sort of a breakout player. I don't think too many people had sort of kind of had him down as somebody that was going to be, a really big sort of threat in this tournament. Cody Gakpo, worth a shout. I was going to say didn't turn up. That would have been harsh. He was sort of shut out in the semi-final by Kyle Walker, but I'd had a big influence on the Dutch who made the semi-finals. I think picking out a French player difficult because they kind of slogged their way through. I thought Koundé and probably Saliba were two of their better players. There were good, I don't want to name everyone, but there were some good players. You mentioned Goulet. I thought it was, you can see why he's at Real Madrid. Yeah. Austria were the team of the group stage, weren't they? And there were a few for Austria that stood out. I really liked Sabitzer in midfield. I think he's absolutely sort of top player. Calafiori for Italy, another that they sort of went out in disgrace, I suppose, the champions, but he was missing for that last 16 game, and I think he was a big miss. But it's going to be a Spanish player. I think they have been the team of the tournament. Yamal, Nico Williams have both been breathtaking on the wings. Rodri's been Rodri in midfield, but I think Fabian Ruiz has been the one that has linked that kind of everything together, really, because the wingers don't get the ball unless somebody passes it to them. Rodri could do that job, but doesn't for Spain. And he's just a connector of that whole team. And if you think that this Spanish side's probably as good an actual team, as what we've seen in what feels like about a decade at international football, maybe even since that Spanish side of 2010, that sort of middle Spanish team. The 2008 one had its flaws. By 2012, they were slightly boring. I thought by 2010 they were in complete control. And I think Ruiz has been the one that's sort of taken Spain up the pitch. He's influenced games. He's been part of their defensive work as well. And they've had a pretty tough run through, really. I mean, group stage that had the European champions. They played Germany in Germany. They played France and they were behind. And I think Fabian Ruiz has had a wonderful tournament.
Don't think anybody could disagree with that, Mark. And the fans obviously like to discuss the best player of the tournament, but they'll also be discussing as well the best pundit. We've had a few new faces in the TV studios over the last month or so. Who's caught your eye?
Yeah, I think ITV have shaded it. I have to say, I think they not much in it really between the commentators. I just enjoy their punditry. I'm sort of a Pugac over Lineker sort of presenter. I like that, and I do think Gary Neville and Ian Wright sort of bounce off each other well. Yeah, Roy Keane is Roy Keane, and he's never going to veer too far away. But yeah, I just prefer that to the kind of Rio Ferdinand. They sort of go Rio, Frank Lampard, and Michael Richards, don't they, for the biggest games. Shearer kind of has moved into the co-coms, and I think he's actually done quite well on co-commentary. But I mean, ITV have sort of shaded it. I'll be watching on the beat just purely because of the advert situation. I'm sure that'll be the same as most people. In terms of like best pundit or best sort of co-com or whatever, I mean, Andros Townsend, really, he might even consider giving up football now and sort of, striking while the iron's hot. I think him and Seb Hutchinson is just a really nice team. They're both so enthusiastic for the game. And when you listen to Townsend, he gives the player view, but he also is really good, I think, from a sort of tactical aspect, clearly does his homework, because he was referencing sort of in games he was doing, he was referencing sort of, you know, stuff he'd seen in friendlies and what they tried to do from corners and bits like that. So I know it's not his first tournament, and he'd done well, hadn't he, at the World Cup previously. But yeah, I'll give it to Andrew. I mean, everyone just says Ali McCoist all the time, and you can't go far wrong if McCoist is on co-coms. But I've really enjoyed Andros Townsend. In terms of the kind of new people, I didn't see loads of Ellen White, but I thought that she'd sort of pop up on the highlights package that sort of the BBC would do, and I thought she was sort of the newer members that we saw. I thought she did sort of particularly well.
I think if it goes wrong for Thomas Frankham, the managerial front, he could be a good addition as a pundit. I think he's been very good inside.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he kind of out-pundited Ange Postecoglou, didn't he? Who kind of just stayed in character, really, throughout.
I do like Ange's his natural sort of reaction to things. I mean, he was absolutely livid with some of the VAR decisions.
Yeah, he was. And I mean, in terms of sort of people that were unexpected, I thought Danny Roll. I mean, it was early in the tournament, but the Sheffield Wednesday manager that sort of suddenly turned up on our TV screens, I thought he did a good job, and you can see why the Sheffield Wednesday fans like him. So yeah, I mean, overall, what I want from the TV sort of department is to not ruin it, and I think that they're getting better at that. I think that there were times where maybe tried too hard and tried to do too many things. I mean, I'm not mad on ITV's rules analyst. I mean, I think if you need a rules analyst, you've gone, you've gone too far. But overall, I've enjoyed the TV work. And one last sort of big up for the BBC, where I think that they did do well. I don't know if you picked up any of the kind of like mini documentaries that they would do on, say, some of the smaller nations, like before a game, like before Italy, Albania. They did a piece on Albanian football, and I thought they did that sort of probably better than ITV.
Yeah, congratulations to both sides. They've done a good job through the tournament, but we've had, as I say, 50 matches, one left to go. And up next, we'll preview the final in Berlin between England and Spain. So Spain against England is the final in Berlin. Sunday at 8 o'clock is the time. I'm sure everybody has got in their minds already ahead of that clash. In terms of the 90-minute full-time prices, Spain around about 11-8. The draw 15-8. England at 5-2. It could, of course, go all the way to extra time and penalties. And to lift the trophy, Spain at 4-6. England 6-5. Let's start off with Spain then, Mark. I mean, we've said this numerous times across the piece of the whole tournament. They clearly have been the best team so far. I suppose what you would say is it's not always the best team that lifts the trophy in the end.
No, it's not. I mean, I think they have been the best team and a worthy favourites for this game. Is clearly going to be a step up from what England have played previously in the tournament. There's no doubt about that. I didn't expect that much of them coming into the finals. I think we mentioned it after the first round of games, didn't we? Oh, they caught the eye with that victory over Croatia. A shout out to Racing Post colleague Liam Flynn, who was has been with Spain from the start, and he was pointing out that he thought that the wide players, Nico Williams and Yamal, would be very important. I know they haven't won it yet, but clearly that they've been better than I anticipated. What I like about the Spanish side is just the balance in that team, really. Rodri, Ruiz, and Pedri. Shame he's injured, but Dani Olmo offers probably more of an attacking threat, if not that sort of ability to carry the ball the way that Pedri does. But it's a different threat. Morata, I always had question marks as to whether Morata would be good enough to win sort of a major finals, and I think if Spain do win, I'm not sure that he'll be because he's been outstanding in front of goal. But what he has done is held the ball up. He's worked really hard for the team. defensively, Lenormand and Laporte, I think would be an area that England might look to target. But the fullbacks, Carvajal and Cucurella, have done a good job. Unai Simon as well in goal, been steady. But it's really been about the way that De La Fuente's been able to blend them as a team, because it's not easy at international football. We've seen a lot of sides, and you can throw England in there, even though they're in the final. I mean, it's not been plain sailing, and it's not been particularly fluent for large spells. But probably the biggest compliment you can say to Spain is that they've played like a club team, and that they've got a real ethos and understanding of what they're trying to do. They keep possession well. They then sort of do break through and sort of attack via the wings. They've got that sort of counter threat as well through the wide players. And they've been a joy to watch. I suppose if you're looking at it from an England point of view, I don't think they're the perfect team. I don't think that this is an absolute gimme for Spain. They deserve to be favourites, but from England's point of view, I think they would have settled for this at the start of the before the tournament started. I would have said, if you'd have had a straw poll of 100 people and said who's better, England or Spain, like most people would have said England, without a doubt. So the bookmakers have reacted to what we've seen over the course of the last month, and you have to. But like I say, going into this tournament, and you would have said player for player, I think you would have said how many sort of Spanish players get in the England team. It wouldn't have been as many as the English players get into the Spanish side. So that's probably how well De La Fuente's done to be able to make them a team rather than individuals.
You mentioned De La Fuente there, Mark, and I do wonder whether, when you consider Gareth Southgate and his former roles, the fact that they've been involved in the youth setup or a younger setup of both nations, that seems to almost be an integral thing now for countries going forward, that they have this structure a little bit like club sides do to try and build their way up to the top level. And on this occasion, it's probably worked for both.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely. I mean, look, you can pick that two ways, can't you? Because you could argue that at the last European Championship, the best manager in the tournament, Roberto Mancini, in terms of kind of what he had, on his CV, was kind of better than what anybody else had. And so I don't want to be too sort of revolutionary here and say like it's got to be the way, but it's clearly different managing an international team, whether that be under 17s, under 21s, Olympic teams, whatever it is, to managing a club side. And I think that you struggle potentially as a club manager going in there. I think Nagelsmann's done well up to a point. He'd be one that was dropped in late, but certainly De La Fuente, if he was on the market, there wouldn't be that many top managers, top clubs looking for him. You'd say the same about Southgate. You'd say the same about Ronald Koeman, and even Didier Deschamps. I don't think there'd be a long queue of elite clubs looking for him. So. And Deschamps done very well, hasn't he? Roberto Martinez, he was a quarter-finalist. Marek Yakin. So I think it is different. And then if you look at sort of the Argentina, who are kind of the standout team in terms of they won the World Cup, they're in the Copa America final. Scaloni also was in charge of the under-20s before he was in charge of the sort of the national team as well. So I do think that there might be something in it. I suppose if there's a takeaway from it and from this tournament is that you don't have to be a big name coach. You can, just because you haven't managed at the highest level doesn't mean you struggle international football. And I definitely think that I was kind of negative towards De La Fuente at the start, probably because I just hadn't heard of him. He sort of looked at him, you'd seen he'd been part of the Spanish sort of youth setup, but had they had like a flashy kind of manager, like I don't know, back in the day, like a Del Bosque or something like that, probably Spain might have been more on my radar, I suppose.
We'll look at the key battles between the two sides in a moment, but let's just focus on England for the time being, Mark. I think both you and I were genuinely surprised to see the first half performance, considering what we'd seen earlier in the tournament. Can you put your finger on why all of a sudden there was a bigger improvement? Was it potentially because they're up against a bigger name and the expectation probably grows a little bit more?
Yeah, maybe the pressure's off to some extent. Like you're in the semi-final, so if when you go into a tournament as favourites, there's like this pressure and weight of expectation on you, and it's like, please don't mess it up. And then they kind of, the worst has already happened to them, because they would have known, like that Slovakia game, until Bellingham gets that overhead equaliser in 95th, 96th minute. They would have known that they were going out of that tournament. They would have known how they felt at that moment, and sort of the flack that was coming and the embarrassment that was heading their way. So I think in some respects it's like, well, it can only get, things can only get better from here. Yeah. There was signs in that quarterfinal, and we mentioned it, that there were it was a low bar, but they did play slightly better against Switzerland, and there were signs of things getting better. Definitely in the first half, I think Netherlands gave England more space to play, which was a benefit. But I'm going to give England sort of more of the credit and say, like, that's what happens when you move the ball quickly. You have runners off the ball. It just felt like there was more enthusiasm for the game. Like they weren't plodding along. They were, bursting through. If Kyle Walker was playing right centre back, right winger. Against Slovakia, he looked like he was like running in quicksand. I don't know what happened to him in that game. Him and Saka were combining well down that right-hand side. I hadn't seen that since the opening minutes, really, against Serbia. I thought Mainu was carrying the ball forward superbly. He was then finding Bellingham and Foden in more space. Foden clearly wants to play centrally. He is now playing centrally. So that was something that sort of you see the better of Foden. He was unlucky with that shot that was cleared off the line. Harry Kane, I thought, probably had his best 45 minutes of the tournament. He didn't look as sluggish. I know then obviously he comes off and Watkins scores the winning goal. But I thought Kane played well in that first half and was part of the good performance. I think we do have to mention the penalty though, because in my opinion, that's never ever a penalty. I don't.
The only thing I was going to say, Mark, and I agree with you. I think I agree with you. It's particularly harsh, and I think if I was the defender, I desperately need to put my foot in there to try and block it. The only argument I would say is anywhere else on the pitch that will be given as a free kick. Should they look at it differently because it's in the penalty area? He's got a high boot. His studs are up. That was the only argument that I would kind of make.
Yeah, I think that there's a law in the game, within the rules, that says, there's a law, but I can't remember it word for word, but there's something about the spirit of the game, which can actually, if you remember, do you remember the Bayern Munich, when they wanted a handball against Arsenal in the Champions League, when one of the Arsenal players picked the ball up from a goal kick?
Yes, I do remember.
There was. And it sort of, the referee spoke then, or sort of former referee spoke about the spirit of the game and kind of almost what do you expect? And that is a law, so you can go within the spirit of the game. And Howard Webb often talks about, like, what do people expect the outcome to be in that situation? And I don't think there are too many people that expect the outcome there for somebody attempting to block a shot. And the shot's got away. It's not impacted in Kane's ability to score. I don't even know if the ball was out of play by the time it connected with Dumfries' boot. It was hard to see, obviously, because he's got his shot away. It's not impacted it. I didn't think it was sort of careless. I didn't think it was reckless. It felt all very natural. And the other point is that VAR is supposed to only rule on sort of what are considered obvious errors and sort of significant injustices, and that wasn't one of those occasions in my opinion. So it's worked for England, and there'll be England fans going, Chris Waddle hit the post in Italia 90, and Gascoigne was a toenail away in 96. What about Sol Campbell's disallowed goal in 98, and the Frank Lampard one against Germany, and these things, Fergie always used to say that these things even themselves out when United were given another penalty in the last minute at Old Trafford. But I get that. I can understand, and while England fans won't care, Imagine if that was given against Kyle Walker last night and England went out. Like the same people saying, "Oh, that's a penalty," would be sort of, the referee would be on the front page of all of the newspapers, and we're calling for his head. So I don't think it was a penalty.
And in fairness, it wasn't the referee's call, really. It's down to VAR. And, again, we could be here all day talking about VAR, so we won't go down that route. Just a quick word ahead of sort of the England team selection for the final, Mark. You made one change for the semi-final with Konsa dropping out and Gahey returning after suspension. I think probably likelihood is that he'll probably start with the same side, but I just wonder, the one dilemma he might have is to start with Luke Shaw ahead of Kieran Trippier.
Yeah, I mean, at half time, Luke Shaw comes on for Trippier, and you think, that's a positive substitution. It's the right thing to do, because it was a dead end down that side of the pitch. And actually, Netherlands just gave up, didn't they? They gave up defending it in the end, and they concentrated on the middle. Apart from one good touch and cross, didn't think Shaw did anything really in the 45 minutes. The team didn't play that well with him. Is he fully fit? I don't know. I mean, a first start in a European Championship final just since February just feels too much. I mean, they've built up his fitness, haven't they? Like he played, what was it? Because it was extra time, and then some part of that end game against Switzerland. Then he gets 45 against Netherlands. No, I mean, having said you need a left-sided player, I'm almost thinking I wonder if Trippier is the more sensible option to start the game. I do prefer the back three. One of the reasons I prefer it is that you do get Foden and Bellingham closer together in their sort of more natural habitat, and it allows you to have like that boxing midfield with Rice and Mainu sort of deeper. And even against Spain's real high quality, Rodri, Ruiz and Dani Olmo, England, if they play that way, will have an extra man in midfield. Now, they might have issues in other areas as a result, but it does give you that sort of solidity in midfield. And I just think big games, like, you don't want to lose that midfield battle. So I quite like the way that it sets up with that boxing midfield. I think in terms of key battles, that is the one really, because Spain want to dominate possession.
Yeah.
I feel like Kyle Walker can look after Nico Williams. He's done it against, say, Kylian Mbappe before. The other side, Yamal against. That's why I think Trippier might start. Because Yamal wants to come inside, and that comes in onto Trippier's right foot as well. Gay and Stones, I'm still not 100% on sort of them. I like as a partnership, and I don't think Rice has had an amazing tournament. In terms of key battles, though, I think one area where England do have an advantage is off the bench. I think we've seen Cole Palmer, we've seen Ollie Watkins make impacts. So Southgate, I feel like, has got the upper hand off the bench. A counter against that, I do think it's an advantage to have had an extra day's rest at this stage as well. So if it goes beyond extra time, I think Southgate will have to use these subs. But yeah, key battles always in midfield.
Yeah, I would have thought going to extra time and having a day less would have been even more critical in terms of the final as well. So that late goal certainly did England more than one favour. Let's look at the best bets then for the final, Mark. What are you looking at here?
Yeah, I'm going to go for Spain to win the trophy. I just think they've been the best side, and even though England have got that extra man in midfield with the way that they play, Rodri can almost look after Bellingham and Foden. He's kind of that good the way that he does it, and I would be concerned with Fabian Ruiz's runs from midfield, Dani Olmo, like taking up them positions that Simon scored from for Netherlands. I thought Switzerland are not a great side, are they? But when they stepped it up against England, there were signs there that defence wasn't working amazingly. And I think against Slovakia as well, first half, it wasn't too good. So Spain, we know how good they are because they've beaten Germany, they've beaten France. Okay, Italy, you can argue as to sort of the standard of them, but they've beaten two really top teams. Like, England haven't up until this point, have they really? Slovakia in the last 16, not a great side. I mean, Netherlands finished third in their group. They got talented players, but they did. You can't underestimate they finished third in their group, and Switzerland are sort of Switzerland really. So this is England's biggest test. I'm sure most people listening or watching will want England to win, but I think you have to answer this sort of honestly. So I'll go for Spain to win the trophy, but there are loads of other markets on the final. I think we should maybe just discuss a couple of them, Warren, in terms of goal scorers and sort of card candidates, and we can do a bet builder after that maybe. But I think in terms of sort of goal scorers, sort of two that stand out for me, one on each team. One will be Danny Olmo, because I do think there'll be goals, actually. I think this could be an entertaining final, but Olmo, like the way that he's ability to get shots off, I think I've spoken about that quite a lot in this tournament. Did have a sort of quiet season for Leipzig. Maybe he's fresh because he didn't play a full season for them. And then one player from an England point of view, it would be Mainu, because he is capable of taking responsibility. We've seen that in FA Cup finals and stuff like that. So he's not going to be overawed by the occasion. And I think that Rodri will have his hands full with Bellingham and also Foden, and that's where England are on paper at their biggest threats. That might just allow someone like Mainu to have a pop from distance, and he doesn't mind having a shot. In terms of cards, if you fancy England to win, Jordan Pickford about 9-1. The old time wasting could come into play in the final. I think Harry Kane is more interesting at 15-2. Might get frustrated. I'm not expecting England to have loads of the ball, and if he has to drop deep and sort of try and disrupt Rodri and stuff like that, I'm sure he will. He could be more interesting. But that man Rodri, there's no suspension coming here. If Bellingham or Foden get the other side of him, he'll just foul them. We've seen him do it time and time again for Man City. And in a final, there's no real repercussions, is there, to picking up a card? So I thought he was probably one of the pick of the prices at 9-2, outside of what I'm going to mention in the bet builder. And Cucurella at 16-5, was given a horrible time by the German fans in Munich, wasn't he? Before that semi-final. I'm not sure it was handball. It wasn't his fault, even if it was. But he got some massive stick. Just for England down that right-hand side, it became started to come together for Saka and Kyle Walker. Obviously Saka had a good game in the quarterfinal, Walker in the semi-final. He might be one that gets involved.
I mean, you nailed it with Jude Bellingham getting a booking in the semi-final, Mark, as well. And like you say, that midfield battle is going to be crucial. You can imagine that, a quick break, and Rodri's going to be left to try and mop up again at the back, and every chance that yellow card might come his way. We're recording this, by the way, on Thursday morning, and there are so many options in terms of markets available already ahead of the final. So plenty of options if you want to check those out prior to Sunday's clash in Berlin. We'll turn our attentions now to the bet builder. And what's your selection here, Mark?
Yeah, it's unlucky in that semi-final because we had the Van Dijk booking, Bellingham foul, but Memphis went off early, unfortunately. So I think this is going to be a good game, and I think it might even be more entertaining than the traditional final. I'm sort of going to swim against the tide of opinion that it's got to be tight. It's a final. The players are knackered and all that sort of stuff. So I'm going to go for over 2.5 goals as sort of the first leg. I'm going for Spain to win the first half. We've seen Spain just go off like absolute train in their games, haven't we? In sort of all the matches, really. Even against France, they conceded fairly early, but they'd already missed a good chance through Fabian Ruiz, and they were ahead at half time, always looking to play on the front foot and then sort of sit back. And England, conceded early against Netherlands. They conceded first against Switzerland. They conceded early-ish against Slovakia as well. So I'm going to go for Spain to win the first half. So we've got over 2.5 goals, Spain to win the first half, and I am going to go for Jude Bellingham to be booked. Again, there's no repercussions for picking up the yellow card. He's so feisty. He wants to be involved in absolutely everything. I can see him, if England are doing well, sort of stopping counter attacks and sort of being prepared to pick up a yellow card. If they're doing badly, I wouldn't be surprised if he lost his rag slightly. He's just one of them players that does play on the edge. So comes in at about 20-1. So goals, Spain to sort of ping the lids and get in front early doors, and Bellingham to be booked.
Yeah, I was looking at the stats earlier on, and the last 4 games between Spain and England have had 2 or more goals in them as well, including 3-2 last time out. So the way that the 2 teams played in the semi-final, Mark, you would hope they would come out like that again.
Yeah, you would. I mean, obviously, there's much more riding on this game than any of those previously. I remember Eric Dyer take Ramos out, and he sort of cut him in half, didn't he, in one of those matches? Yeah, I think the general perception is that it's a final. It will be low scoring. We've seen it in Champions League finals in sort of recent years that the goals sort of expected to really come down. But look how good that World Cup final was between Argentina and France. I think if you get good players and good attackers on the pitch, they can light it up, even if it is a game of this magnitude.
Any plans for Sunday, Mark, or are we just sitting at home and try and watch quietly behind the sofa?
So it's my wife's birthday. Well, it's not a birthday on the Sunday. It's a birthday on, I can't remember now if it's the Monday or the Tuesday, but it's her birthday sort of very early next week. So we sort of needed to go out at the weekend. I think I'm going to have to work the Saturday now just because of how busy it's going to be sort of, with work in England in the final. So I said on the Sunday, we can go out for sort of family dinner, 4:00. So we can go. So we will have a couple of hours, have a few beers, and then get back indoors for the final. I mean, look, 20 years ago, I would have been desperate to be in a pub and sort of, have someone pour a pint over me after Watkins scored that semi-final. It's not the way it is now. How about you, Warren? You're going to watch it with the kids?
Funnily enough, Mark, my eldest turns 18 on Sunday, so
double celebration.
This has been a kind of on the horizon for a while. So he's known it's going to be the Euros final. So I think he's got plans with his mates to watch the game on Sunday. So it does mean that I'll probably stay at home, to be honest, and it might well stop me from having a drink if that's the case as well. We shall see. I'm not sure I'll be able to stop myself if England win, to be honest. But we should all enjoy the final, I'm sure, on Sunday. And those of an English persuasion will hope that the wait for a major trophy finally comes to an end. Thanks for Mark for all his efforts during the tournament. And don't forget, of course, to like, subscribe and comment. Plus, you should check out as well next Tuesday's episode of The Sweet Spot with Dave Clark and Steve Palmer. They'll be looking ahead to the 4th and final major of the year. It is, of course, the Open Championship. But for now, thanks for everybody for being part of this Euro show. And we'll be back with a new format for the start of next season as well in early August. That's all to look forward to, not far away from the return of domestic football. But for now, enjoy the final on Sunday. And please remember to gamble responsibly.